All right, guys. Welcome again to the Sunday Night Mac Forum video chat. I hope that you enjoy what we have on the agenda for tonight. I see that I got a message here from Dennis saying that he's going to watch. So if you've made it in, welcome, Dennis. Um, Hopefully you will enjoy that. And hopefully you'll enjoy what we have on the show tonight. Want to point out a couple of things real quick. We're a minute or two late starting because we had a little bit of an internet outage there for a few minutes right before the show started. So if you lose me all of a sudden tonight, it's probably a problem on my end, not yours. All right. Having said that, let's get right down to the business at hand. I want to start off with first of all, just kind of a quick update. Check the main forum pages about a half an hour before the show. We were up in the general vicinity of 277,000 members, the newest of which has a username Soggy Cornflakes, which I think is great. Don't like soggy cornflakes for breakfast, but it's a great username as it goes. All right. If you're watching, if you've been watching for a while, you know that one of the reasons we moved to using the Google Hangouts on air format is that we could broadcast the show and have people kick in, and that's worked out kind of well. But one of the things that we have been missing for a while, we have not been pleased with really, is we've been trying to figure out a way, or have a good vehicle rather, for people to look at the forum and use the forum on their iDevices, on the iPhone, on the iPad. And I tried Tap-a-Talk a few times. I wasn't really keen on it, especially on the phone, but then again, I don't do a lot of web surfing on the phone, so that was not a big deal. And I saw something that I'm going to be checking out. I haven't had a chance to do it yet because I got to do some things to my iPad first. But member Sparky Mac points out that there is an iPhone app now. I think it's based partly on Tap-a-Talk. It's in the iTunes Store, in the app section. If you want to check it out, I'll be posting a link to that page later after the show. I'll try to get the links posted right after the show. I thought I was going to get that done beforehand, but with the internet outage, it's you know, that was a little bit of a problem. I saw a few screenshots that Sparky Mac put up in the thread, and it looks interesting. It looks like it might be somewhat viable. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a way to access the forums on your iDevices. Also, a couple other things that come up this week. I promised you last week I would include, we'll count that as our iDevice tip of the week here. Haven't had a chance to research a lot of iDevice tips this week. So we'll count that as our iDevice tip of the week here. Last week I told you I was going to try to include some Mac tips and iOS tips in every show. For the Mac tips, we got a couple for you this week, based in part on some threads that happened earlier in the week and trying to answer some questions from users. As a consequence, I found out a couple of things. One of them I probably knew and had forgotten, and the other one I had not realized before. So what we've got coming up for you here are a couple of, we got one with regards to Gatekeeper, and then the others will have to deal primarily with some issues with Time Machine. That one of them is something I know that I had not realized. Let's start with Gatekeeper. Gatekeeper is a way for people to be a little more, shall we say, what's the word I'm looking for? It gives them an opportunity to be a little more trusting, for lack of a better word, of where software is coming from. gives you a little bit of control over what kind of applications you want to allow installed. Essentially, what Gatekeeper is doing, it's in the security and privacy settings area of OS X, and what it's done is basically used the concept of a signed application. Signed applications being those that are recognized by Apple, the developers recognized by Apple, and that means they're taking one more step to demonstrate some degree of legitimacy, and it's a somewhat time-consuming process to go through. It can be. So what Gatekeeper does is basically you have in the security and privacy section for Gatekeeper 3 different levels. You can choose to allow applications that come through the App Store, and only those. And those, as we know, have been vetted by Apple for a variety of issues, compatibility, and the like. You can also choose to allow things that are from the App Store plus identified developers. That is to say, recognized developers that have gone through the trouble of signing with Apple. These are guys who are recognized Apple developers, but for whatever reason do not have their software in the App Store. Not every Apple developer has chosen to put their material in their software in the App Store. It's something that, for a variety of reasons that we won't really spend a lot of time on this evening, not every developer wants to be part of that App Store concept. So that's something that will, that's the second tier in the level of security. And the third one is to allow applications from anywhere. Now, here's what happens. Let's suppose that I have my settings set to allow applications from the App Store, from the Mac App Store. That works fine. When I download something from the App Store, it goes right through, the installation progresses, no problem. But let's suppose then that I go somewhere like Mac Update, or I go somewhere like SourceForge. I download something from SourceForge, for example. It's not in the App Store. Gatekeeper will kick on, and it will ask me if I want to update the, if I want to open the page and what I want to do. That scares some people sometimes when it happens. So here are the workarounds. Let's suppose you've got a piece of software and you know that it's from some developer that you trust. You've trusted to put it on your machine, and Gatekeeper is giving you this warning. What can you do about it? Well, there are two ways to do it. I generally have taken the long way around when I do this. And what that involves is you go into the Apple menu, go to System Preferences, go to the Security and Privacy section, and then hit the General tab. And at the bottom, you can give Gatekeeper directions. Do I want to? You switch that setting from Mac App Store to either App Store and identified developers or anywhere, and it'll let the installation proceed. The problem with that is, let's say you had your settings originally set to Mac App Store, and now you've changed it down to anywhere because you downloaded a piece of software from somewhere like SourceForge, and you want to know what you want to be able to use it. Well, you've got to, once you make that change and set it to anywhere, and then install the software, you've got to go back and put your settings back the way they were. You don't have to, but you probably have them on the higher level of security for a reason, because you're concerned about something. You have to remember to change them back. Now, here's the alternative to that. This is the shortcut that I really had either forgotten about or did not know. Craig Dominique, our resident redneck, as he calls himself, reminded us in a thread on the forum that when you right-click on a piece of software and select Open, you should be able to run it after that and go ahead and complete the process without having to go into the security and privacy settings, changing them, and then changing them back. Much faster way to go. If you're using a single button mouse, remember that right-click on a single button mouse, you can achieve the same effect using control click. If you're on a trackpad, what you're using as a right click or control click kind of depends on how you have your trackpad settings. That's the first of our Mac tips, and if I can remember to do that, I don't always remember the fastest, most efficient way to do things, but if I can remember to do that, that will save me some time, because I'm a digital pack rat. I'm pretty regularly experimenting with different pieces of software or trying something to see if it will do something that I need it to do. You know, sometimes it's paid software, sometimes freeware. I have a tendency to kind of experiment a little bit. So if you know, this will save you a couple of clicks and a lot of frustration. You don't have to remember to go back and reset it. The other couple of tips that I have for you tonight have to do with Time Machine. Time Machine is, as you know, it has been around OS X for a while. I believe Leopard might have been the first version. I don't remember for 100% certainty. Don't quote me on that. It's changed a little bit, improved a little bit over time. And one of our members had a problem recently, and it pointed out an issue with Time Machine that I had not experienced before. Mainly because I've been lucky in the sense that I have not had to very often replace files using Time Machine. One of the nice things about Time Machine is that you can go back and restore your entire system, go back to a certain date when the system was functioning, restore the entire system, or you can restore individual files. And that ability to restore individual files was what was going to help this user out. They had accidentally removed or otherwise destroyed some bookmarks in Google Chrome, tried to use Time Machine to go back and get the old bookmark file and reload it, and they ran into an interesting little problem. Normally, what you would do to restore a file in Time Machine, let's say you want to restore an individual file, normally what you would do is click on the Time Machine icon that's down in the dock. This sort of Star Wars-y, space-ish screen pops up, and on the right side is a bunch of tick marks representing the various backups and with dates and times listed. You would click on one of those tick marks to back up to a date where you knew the file was good. The window pops up for that backup. You navigate to the file that you need, click on the file or maybe a couple of files, and then click Restore. Normally that works fine and no problem. It's worked for me in the past a few times I've had to use Time Machine. But this user ran into an interesting problem. When they went to do Time Machine to reload the file that they need, the bookmark file, they could not find the bookmark file. They literally could not see where the file was supposed to be. Couldn't find it anywhere in the Time Machine backup. Now, the first thing to ask yourself is, did the Time Machine space screen, what I call the space screen, with the tick marks show up properly? And the answer in this case was yes. The file that was needed just wasn't visible to Time Machine. Well, here's why. In OS 10.7 and above, the user library file, that is the library file that's inside your user account, is hidden by default. If you are in 10.7, 10.8, or 10.9, that folder is hidden by default, and everything in it is hidden. Well, the file that this user needed to restore is in that hidden directory. It's buried in a subdirectory in that hidden library folder. Because it was hidden on the original drive, and Time Machine copies things exactly as they are, it's hidden in the Time Machine backup. And if you try to search for it with everything hidden, Time Machine will not find that file. It's there. I guarantee you it's there. I've tried it. It's there, but Time Machine will not find it that way. Okay. The secret to this, and I'm not the one that came up with this idea. First, the secret to this is to first, before you go to Time Machine, unhide. If you know that the file you're looking for is in one of these hidden directories, you've got to unhide that directory first. Then, when you go to Time Machine, it will pop up in the backup. So here are the steps that have worked for me when I tried it. First of all, don't even open Time Machine's restore function yet. Let's just start from scratch. First thing you do is to unhide the directory that you need to work with. In this case, let's say it's something that's in, you can unhide the entire library folder. Now, there are a couple of different ways to do that. Macworld had an article a while back with about 5 different ways to unhide the library. One of them is a terminal command. I won't try to quote it right here. It's a ch flag command. I'm not a big terminal guru. I didn't put it in the notes. I'd rather not quote it wrong. I'll have a link to this thread in the show notes after the show. But that's one way to do it. But what the problem with using terminal, here you go. Let's say I unhide a directory. In terminal, if I want that directory re-hidden, when I'm done with Time Machine, I have to go back and re-hide it if I want it hidden. So here's the way here's my preferred way to do it. If you go to the Finder and you choose Go to Folder from the Finder's Go menu and put in the path name of the folder that you need to go to, even if it's a hidden folder, that folder will now be open to you. It'll be visible. Once you've done that, now you can go to Time Machine. You can launch Time Machine's restore function from the dock, and not only will it go to that invisible folder now, but it will appear. That's where it starts at. In other words, because that's where you were when you launched Time Machine, if I'm not mistaken, that's where it starts at. So wherever you started at, whatever directory you were in when you launched Time Machine, that's the directory it's going to be in the backup. So now you've unhidden the library file. All you've got to do now, and when you unhide the library directory, that unhides all the subdirectories underneath. So once you unhide that directory and go into Time Machine, now you can go into the folder that you need. Remember, you've got to kind of know where this file is or be able to search for it. But once you search for it and you find the file that you need, if you click on the file and then click Restore, Time Machine not only restores the file but puts it back in the right place. So let's just assume for a moment that the file you need to replace is in the library folder inside a folder called Application Support. It's going to put that file If that's where it was in the backup, it's going to put it in the right place and restore it to the right place. So that's a good thing to know. I did not realize that Time Machine did not show you hidden files, simply because the few times I've had to use Time Machine to do a restore, I've only had to restore files that were open, that were visible, like in my with my data. So I had not experienced this. This was a new thing for me. That's a great little hint to know about Time Machine. As I've surfed the web over the last couple of weeks, or over the last week rather, and particularly in Mac forums, I've come across some other questions about time machines, some misconceptions about how it works. We've tried to clear up a little bit of those, and also a couple of things that seem to come up regularly. And one of them has to do with what happens to Time Machine when you put your Time Machine backups on something like a Time Capsule. Now, here's the thing. Here's two things you need to know. One of the questions that come up is, if you put your Time Machine backups on a Time Capsule, and then you put other files on that Time Capsule as well, will the Time Machine destroy, or, for lack of a better word, eat the other folders? Generally, no. As far as I know, they don't. I had my backups like that initially, and I didn't have a problem with that, with Time Machine eating other folders. But here's what will happen to your Time Machine, to your backup. Time Machine, when it is stored on a network, Time Machine stores the backup in what's called a sparse bundle file. A sparse bundle file is essentially a disk image that has, I know this is not exactly technically correct, but it'll be a good example. It's a disk image the size of which can grow. So let's say that your initial backup took up 40, 50 meg, 40, 50 gigabyte rather. All right. Then you add some more files to it. Now you're up to maybe 40.1 gig. That file is going to grow, and it's going to keep growing. Now, here's what's going to happen. It will keep taking up space as long as space is available. It won't eat your other files that are on the Time Capsule, but it will just keep taking up whatever space is available. And sometimes, as you add new files to the Time Capsule, when you go to do the Time Machine backup, you don't have enough space. Now Time Machine has to sort of cannibalize some of the early backups to make room and make sure that it fits. Once again, doesn't cannibalize your existing files. What it does is it kind of removes some of the older backups. That's good. But some people don't really like that behavior. They want to know, what can you do to limit the size of that sparse bundle? Because I can tell you it'll keep growing until it runs out of space. Here's what you can do. These are just a couple of things that occurred to me. There is a way to go into the airport utility where you set up a Time Capsule and click on the Disks tab. I can post more detailed directions in the forum later. I'm kind of doing this off my head at the moment. I don't have that program open. You can go into the Disk tab and set up an area and confine Time Machine to that area. Basically, it's the equivalent of setting up an account on the Time Capsule. You can confine it that way. It's really not easy to, on a normal hard drive, you could also control Time Machine size by partitioning the drive. That's a little more difficult in the case of a Time Capsule, because to actually partition the drive, you've got to take the drive out. So my solution, which I like better than either setting off a cordoned off area or using, taking the drive out, formatting, and put it back in. My solution is I have my backups on a hard drive that's attached to the time capsule. Now I get the benefit of having I get the benefit of having the wireless backup capability. I also have two additional benefits. One of them can be very important. One of them is that I control the size of the time machine backup. In other words, it's much easier to format that drive because it's attached to USB. It's much easier than taking the time capsule apart. The other thing is, not only can I control the size of the partition that I want Time Machine to take up, but here's the big one for me. On a time capsule, let's say you start having directory issues on that drive. Disk utility is not going to see that drive. The internal drive of the time capsule, disk utility does not see it to make directory repairs. But if you have a hard drive attached to the time capsule, you can make it possible for disk utility to see that drive. But what you've got to do is disconnect the drive from the USB port, plug it into your computer directly, and then make your repairs to the directory structure, and then reattach the drive to the time capsule. That generally works. That's the biggest reason that I have my backups on an external drive attached to the time capsule drive. It's also the reason that I have my iTunes library on a drive that's attached to the time capsule. Now, particularly in the case of the iTunes library, you want to be aware of one thing. Sometimes that drive is any drive attached to the USB port on a time capsule is a little bit slow to launch, to mount up. Not a huge problem when you're doing a time machine backup. Can be a little bit of an issue if you're running iTunes and your library is on an external drive. It's not a huge problem, but it does occasionally slow things down a little bit. There are a lot of other interesting ins and outs to using Time Machine, both either with a regular hard disk or attached to a time capsule. There are some advantages to using a time capsule or a network device, and there are some disadvantages. I'm going to put a link in the notes to a site that I found a while back. Somebody a couple months ago referred to me as Mac Forum's Time Machine Guru. I'm not quite that, but a lot of what I know about Time Machine came from one particular site that has answers to some of the more common questions. A lot of the information that you would want to know about the ins and outs of putting Time Machine on a time capsule. What formatting the drive has to have, what the limitations are here, there, everywhere. I'm going to put a link to that site in the notes after the show. It really has helped me tremendously in terms of knowing what's available and what the ins and outs are with Time Capsule. One of the things that I noticed with Time Machine and Time Capsule is, for me anyway, one of the things that I did not know until recently that I could do is you need to distinguish if you have a problem with your Time Machine backups not being completed. One of the things that you kind of maybe need to decide a little bit, and here's where having your backup on an external drive can really help. The few times that I've had issues with Time Machine not backing up not wanting to back up my material, it's either been one of two things. One of them has been the external drive that I had a problem on, that I had my Time Machine backup on, had directory structure issues. Well, I can pull that one up, disconnect it, plug it into my machine, as I said earlier, and run the directory structure problems and correct those usually. The other thing that I like is that now once in a while I will have a problem with that sparse bundle file that gets saved when you create a Time Machine backup using a network drive. Every once in a while that sparse bundle file will get slightly damaged. Here's a way to fix that in some cases. If you find that sparse bundle file on your time capsule and open it, just like, just double click it like you would any other disk image, it will pop up in the Finder in a lot of cases, just as if it were a disk. Once it does that, you can launch launch Disk Utility. Click on it, select it in the left-hand pane, and try to run Disk Repair Utility, the disk repair portion. It may or may not work. I've had it work once or twice on the sparse bundle that's on my external drive. I think it works when the sparse bundle is on the time capsule as well, assuming you double-click that sparse bundle and mount it on the desktop first as a disk drive. Once you do that, then I think you can see it in Disk Utility. You don't see the whole time capsule. What you see is that one sparse bundle. It appears as a disk. At least it has for me when it's mounted on that external drive, even though the drive is connected to a time capsule. So I hope I didn't muddy that up too much for you. And that's it for our Mac tips of the week. It took a little while to run through those. A couple of they're short tips, but they have a lot of practical uses. And I want to thank our membership for bringing those issues to the front. And notice, those tips did not come directly from me. They came from reading threads by other users, where other users chimed in. Sometimes we get help, we get answers to questions from some of our relatively new members. So even if you're a new member, if you've got a question, chime in. If you've got an answer to a problem, chime in. The one thing I would suggest to you is, let's say that you do a forum search, because the answer to your question may have already been taken care of. Try the forum search. Try the, if you can't do it that way, try the Google search tip that I listed a couple weeks ago. But if you can't find your answer, sometimes you'll find that your question was talked about months and months and months, sometimes years ago. And now you've got a similar problem. If it's an old thread that's, months old, or in some cases a couple of years old, you're probably better off starting a new thread as opposed to piggybacking onto the existing thread, necro-posting an existing thread. The reason is a lot of our experienced members, sometimes they come in and they only have a short amount of time to answer a lot of questions or answer as many questions as they can. So they don't always look at those old threads. I have clicked on necro-posted threads numerous times because I didn't realize that the thread that the question was in was started 3-4 years ago. Okay, so it's partly a matter of convenience for the other forum members and moderators, but it also increases the likelihood that it's going to get noticed and maybe get you an answer a little bit quicker than necro posting. So try that. Also, there's a sticky in the forum and I'll try to remember to put a link to the sticky, for a thread that one of our moderators, Van Smith, created, about what kinds of information you might need to help us help you. In other words, if you're doing a post, particularly if it's your first, post where you had a problem. If you're new to the forum, we certainly expect, would like to have you do a kind of a welcome post. There's a welcome area in Sweb's Lounge where you can post and say, "Hi, first-time member. I'm whoever, and this is what I have. This is what I like to do." That kind of thing. Let us get to know you. But the first time you post a thread about a problem, there's some things that we really need to know. The version numbers of the software that's giving you a problem, the hardware that you're running it on, the OS number, etc., etc., etc. And Van Smith has put together a pretty good sticky about what that information is that we might need. Yes, I know we end up asking for it a lot, and sometimes people forget to post it. We're not asking just to be obnoxious. Sometimes the solution matters, whether you're running 10.6, 10.7, 10.8, 10.9. 10.10 is going to be out. Yosemite is going to be out soon. I don't know when, but my guess would be late fall. If Apple stays on their typical releases for the last couple ones, you're looking at probably sometime mid to late October. And by the way, just to close out the show, I'm getting close to the time where I'm going to call it a night here, but just to close things out a little bit, let me, and I'll try to remember to put this in as well. I just thought of this, or I'd have the link right here in front of me. I get a newsletter from Cult of Mac periodically, and or an email from Cult of Mac periodically. And one of the things, I went to a link that they had in one of their emails recently, and it was a bunch of Apple rumors that have proven to be dead wrong over the years. And the reason that these are funny to me is because about this time of year, the worldwide, there's a couple big times that are rumor times, and two of them seem to be right before Worldwide Developer Conference. Well, that's already come and gone. But now we're into the late July, early August. And in a couple of weeks, we will hit something similar to what my racing fans might call, some of my racing friends might call silly season, okay? And silly season in racing is when drivers are shifting from, this year they're with one team, next year they're going to be with a different team, okay? Silly season for Mac users, or at least for me, is this period of time now from about early September, late August, early September, until Apple gets their fall stuff out. Whatever the fall news is going to be. Is it good? If it's going to be Yosemite, is it going to be a new iPhone? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be that? Every year, tons of rumors get cranked up. Some of these rumors are started by technical analysts, and a lot of times they are dead wrong. A couple of the ones that are in the Cult of Mac new link that I'm going to put in the show, one of them was the Apple TV. And by Apple TV, I don't mean the little set-top box that we all know and love. At one time, there was a rumor that Apple was going to partner with another outfit and make an actual Apple-branded TV set. Samsung, I believe, was one of the partners that was bandied about as a possible partner. Given the relationship with Apple and Samsung recently, I doubt that was ever seriously in the works. Certainly not with Samsung as the providing partner for the screens. The idea behind it was, supposedly the big logic was that Apple everybody's moving to smart TVs now. Everybody but me, apparently. And the whole thought was that Apple would bring their expertise in user interface and smart devices and that kind of thing to help in building a smart TV, and some other TV provider would build the nuts and bolts and guts of the TV setup. That obviously didn't materialize. There are some other rumors in there where some analysts said if Apple doesn't do thing X in the next 60 days, 90 days, they're going out of business. It's funny reading. If it wasn't actual rumors, it would have made a good April Fool's joke. But just thought you'd like that as a little bit of fun. And looks like that's about it for me on Sunday, on this Sunday anyway. I know you're probably tired of hearing me blow the 8. I did enjoy watching the IndyCar race from Toronto this weekend. Missed the first one, slept right through it because it got rained out from yesterday. Did manage to catch the second one, so if any of our Canadian buddies are listening, they did a great job in Toronto with the race there. Too bad I didn't get to see it in person. But I want to be just to be sure, you know, to remind you, check in every Sunday. Sometimes I'll have a co-host with me. I'm going to be scouring the forum for a co-host or two soon. And trying to make some changes. One of the things I want to be sure that I do is to try to be sure that every week we include some tips, or at least an overview of the tip there. For some of the more complicated things, I may follow it up with a blog post in the Mac Forum blog. But at the very least, you'll have the URL, the links to the stuff that I talked about. If you'll give me about a half hour, 45 minutes after the show, the link should be up both on the Mac Forum chat page, and I'll also put them in the forum link for tonight's video chat, so you'll have all the information. And that's going to just about do it for me today, folks. I've enjoyed it. Kind of nice to have some things to talk about. A couple other things that I didn't get to tonight. We'll try to save those over for next week. I'm sure there's going to be some other interesting things. Keep an eye on the forum. You'll find some interesting threads there. And that's going to do it, folks. Until next Sunday, this has been your host, Sly Dude. Hope you've enjoyed the Mac Forum video chat, and we'll see you next week.